Every country on Earth is in debt. The United States alone owes over $38 trillion, the largest figure in its history. The European Union carries roughly $14 trillion, Japan almost $9 trillion, even resource-rich nations like Saudi Arabia, or industrial powerhouses like Germany and China, owe staggering sums. And yet, despite all this debt, life goes on. People shop, governments spend, markets trade. But here's the paradox: if everyone owes money, who is actually owed? Who is collecting on this unimaginable pile of promises? Welcome to Econorium, where history, money, and power intersect. Here, nothing is ever as simple as it appears. Debt isn't merely a burden. It's the invisible architecture of the modern world. It's the framework upon which empires rise and fall, economies boom and collapse, and entire societies are reshaped. Every crisis, every war, every economic miracle rides on this web of obligations that most people never see. The story of debt begins long before credit cards or digital transfers. Centuries ago, governments discovered a radical idea. Instead of paying for wars, roads, or empires with gold they didn't have, they could borrow. In 1694, England was fighting France and running out of gold. The crown turned to wealthy merchants, offering a promise: lend us money now, and we'll pay you back later with interest. The merchants agreed. To manage this system, the Bank of England was created. Suddenly, the state could spend money it didn't yet have, and the lenders held something extraordinary, a promise backed by the government, one that could be traded, sold, or used to extract more money. This was the birth of government debt as we know it. France copied the model, the Netherlands refined it, and when the United States won independence, it adopted it to fund its revolution. National debt became a sign of credibility, not failure. The ability to borrow became a measure of power. Empires no longer needed to conquer gold mines, they could issue bonds and extract interest. The battlefield had shifted from soil to balance sheets. Fast forward 3 centuries, and debt has become the world's dominant export. The United States owes $38 trillion, Japan $9 trillion. Global borrowing grows by roughly $1 trillion every 100 days. Every country owes, every bank lends. Every citizen, through taxes, savings, and pensions, is both debtor and creditor. But the crucial question remains: who actually sits at the other end of this chain? Who benefits? In the United States, roughly half of the debt is publicly held, owed to investors rather than other parts of the government. About 2/3 of these investors are American banks, pension funds, insurance companies, mutual funds, and the Federal Reserve itself. The remaining third, around $9 trillion, sits in foreign hands. Japan holds about $1 trillion, China $800 billion, followed by the UK, Luxembourg, and Belgium. So when headlines scream that the US owes China, it's true, but only in a tiny fraction of the total. Most of America's debt is owed to America. The Treasury issues bonds, banks buy them. The Federal Reserve often buys them back, and taxes pay the interest. It's a circular system, a mirror of itself. And this circle isn't unique to America. Japan lends to the US through treasuries. The US lends to Europe through the IMF. Europe lends to developing nations through the World Bank. Developing nations in turn lend back to advanced economies by parking foreign reserves and buying Western bonds. It's a planetary game of hot potato, but the potato is promises, and the stakes are entire nations. Every promise is secured by another promise, and the chain stretches across continents, centuries, and currencies. And yet, even as the world plays this high-stakes game, few people understand it. We hear about debt crises in Greece or Argentina, but those headlines hide a deeper truth. Debt isn't just numbers on a page. It's power, it's control, and it's trust. It's the invisible hand guiding decisions that shape our lives. Every tax you pay, every pension you hold, every mortgage you owe is part of this system. The debtor and the creditor are often the same person, reflected in a complex mirror of money that spans the globe. The question we started with, who's owed, starts to feel almost meaningless. And yet, it's more important than ever, because while debt may be abstract, the consequences are tangible. When confidence breaks, economies collapse overnight. When trust falters, governments fall. And when the system resets, it always does so with new names on the same balance sheets. This is just the beginning. The journey to understand who really benefits, who really controls, and why debt has become the engine of modern civilization takes us deeper into history, into the markets, and into the lives of ordinary people who carry extraordinary responsibility without knowing it. Now that we understand how debt began and how it spreads across nations, the next question is even more intriguing. Who actually holds the strings of this global web? Who really decides which countries thrive and which stumble under their obligations? The answer isn't simple, and it isn't always visible. It lies in the institutions most people barely notice: central banks, hedge funds, pension funds, and sovereign wealth funds. They are the quiet arbiters of credit, and their decisions ripple through every economy on Earth. Take the United States, for example. Yes, America owes trillions to itself through domestic banks and funds, but a significant portion, around $9 trillion, is held abroad. Japan, China, the UK, Luxembourg, Belgium. These are not just countries, they are pools of capital, investors, institutions, and citizens who rely on the system continuing to function. And the real power, surprisingly, isn't even with governments. It's with the market. When investors lose confidence, yields spike, currencies collapse, and governments are forced to act or face disaster. Central banks sit at the top of this hierarchy. They don't just manage debt, they manufacture it. When the Federal Reserve buys government bonds, it creates new money. The liability on one balance sheet becomes the asset on another. Every dollar circulating represents a promise somewhere else. There is no debt, free money. Every coin, every note, every digital dollar carries an invisible EU. For decades, this loop has sustained itself on one fragile thread: confidence. But confidence can falter. In 2010, Greece's government debt became unpayable. Yields skyrocketed, panic swept through Europe, and the European Central Bank, along with the IMF, intervened. The result: austerity. Taxes rose, public spending fell, unemployment soared. For an entire generation, bailout meant sacrifice. In Argentina, repeated defaults turned debt into a national curse. In Sri Lanka, running out of foreign currency triggered fuel shortages and political collapse. Suddenly, the creditors were no longer invisible. The IMF, anonymous bondholders, rating agencies, these were the forces holding entire nations by the throat. Yet, even after collapse, the system restarts. Old debts are replaced with new ones, loans are restructured, and governments refinance. It's a system designed never to pay off the principal, only to keep rolling it forward. Interest becomes the real product, the rent charged for stability. The global economy depends on it like a shark depends on water. The United States will never fully pay off its $38 trillion in debt. Japan has been rolling over its obligations for decades, now exceeding 250% of GDP. Yet yields remain near zero. Why? Because government debt is considered the safest collateral in existence. A US Treasury bond isn't a liability, it's an asset. Banks use it for security, pension funds hold it. Central banks treat it like money itself. The entire system relies on governments never paying off their debt. This circularity isn't limited to America. Japan lends to the US lends to Europe through the IMF, Europe lends to developing nations through the World Bank, and developing nations park reserves back in Western bonds. Every nation, every institution, every citizen is both debtor and creditor at the same time. It's a planetary game of borrowed promises, where failure in one corner can cascade worldwide. And here's the uncomfortable truth: debt doesn't flow evenly. The interest payments, the rewards, and the power go disproportionately upward. Taxpayers and workers fund the system, while investors and institutions accumulate wealth. Global inequality rises alongside global indebtedness. The game isn't just about nations, it's about classes. The creditor class profits. The debtor class pays. It's a system so vast, so interconnected, that the line between debtor and creditor has blurred beyond recognition. So when we ask again, but to whom is every country in debt? The answer is both simple and terrifying to itself. To the institutions that manage it, and to the market forces that decide who lives and who struggles. Debt is no longer a failure, no longer just a number. It's the engine, the lifeblood, and the ultimate arbiter of the modern world. Beneath this web of bonds, reserves, and promises lies the layer most people never see: the hidden markets, the institutions, and the forces that can topple nations overnight. These are the true movers of the global economy, and they operate silently, invisibly, until a crisis exposes their power. Beneath the surface of global debt lies a reality few ever see: the ultimate power doesn't rest with governments, politicians, or even nations. It rests with the institutions, the investors, and the markets that decide which promises are credible and which are risky. Hedge funds, pension funds, sovereign wealth funds, rating agencies, They are the invisible gatekeepers of the global financial system. They decide who can borrow cheaply, who will pay a premium, and who may collapse under the weight of obligations. One wrong move, one loss of confidence, and an entire economy can be reshaped overnight. Central banks amplify this power. The Federal Reserve, the European Central Bank, the Bank of Japan, they don't just manage debt. They create it, they control it, and in many ways, they dictate the rules of the game. When they buy bonds, they inject new money, stabilizing markets. When they raise rates, they make debt more expensive. Every action sends ripples through pensions, mortgages, currencies, and global trade. The fate of ordinary citizens, their savings, their jobs, their futures, is tied to these invisible hands. This brings us back to the question, if every country is in debt, but to whom, really, does that money belong? The answer is layered. A portion stays within the country itself, held by banks, retirement funds, and the Federal Reserve. Another portion rests in foreign hands, in the hands of other nations' investors, institutions, and governments. But above all, the system relies on confidence. A fragile, invisible trust that governments will honor interest payments, that bonds will hold value, that the cycle of borrowing will continue. Without trust, the machine collapses, and yet this trust is not evenly distributed. Those at the top of the financial pyramid, the largest banks, the most powerful funds, the central institutions, profit endlessly from debt. They earn the interest, gain the assets, and wield influence over economies. Those at the bottom, workers, taxpayers, ordinary citizens, pay the cost. Their taxes fund interest payments, their pensions rely on bond yields, their livelihoods are affected by currency fluctuations and market crises. Debt is no longer just a number on a ledger. It is a mechanism of inequality. It transfers wealth upward, consolidates power, and shapes societies quietly, relentlessly. Look closely, and you'll see that this system is self-reinforcing. Governments issue debt to fund programs, crises, and wars. Institutions buy that debt because it's safe, liquid, and profitable. Central banks stabilize the system, ensuring that confidence persists. Ordinary citizens, often unknowingly, become part of the loop through taxes, savings, or pensions. It's a closed circuit where debtor and creditor are entwined, and the lines between who owes and who benefits blur beyond recognition. This is the modern reality. Debt is the engine of the global economy, the pulse of capitalism itself. It isn't meant to be fully repaid. It is meant to circulate, to create liquidity, to generate interest, and to enforce a system of trust and obedience. Governments refinance, roll over obligations, and issue new bonds. Investors continue to lend because government debt is the safest collateral. The machine never stops, it just moves, quietly, invisibly, across nations, currencies, and generations. And when confidence falters, the consequences are immediate and severe. Markets panic, currencies collapse, governments implement austerity, and citizens bear the burden. Greece, Argentina, Sri Lanka, each tells the same story. Debt is abstract until it becomes personal, until it shapes your economy, your country, your life. The creditor isn't a single nation, a single institution, or a single individual. It is a network, a vast, intricate web of obligations, promises, and trust that binds the world together for better or worse. So, the next time you hear that a country is in debt, ask yourself who really holds the other end. The answer isn't simple. It isn't visible. It isn't one person, one country, or one institution. It is all of us, and yet mostly those at the top. Debt has become a mirror, reflecting the structure of modern power. It is both the lifeblood of economies and the engine of inequality. It is invisible, inevitable, and inescapable. In the end, the real story of debt is not about numbers. It's about trust, power, and the promises we make, some knowingly, many unknowingly, to each other. The world owes itself. The system depends on belief. And as long as that belief holds, debt can stretch indefinitely. But the moment trust falters, the illusion collapses, and we are reminded of what debt really is: a promise that cannot be kept forever. This is the hidden architecture of the global economy, the invisible force shaping nations, markets, and lives. Debt is no longer a burden. It is the engine, the pulse, and the ultimate arbiter of the modern world. Understanding it is the first step toward seeing how money, power, and history collide. And for those who look closely, it is both unsettling and fascinating, a system where everyone owes, but few truly know to whom,